In this week's video, I'll be talking about 5 airbrush accessories that I absolutely love and use daily. Now there are tons of awesome accessories to use while painting with an airbrush, but these are the ones that I consider essential for what I do. And just like always, I purchased all of these accessories with my own money. They're the ones that I love the most and use every single day. Number 1 is very important. I'd consider it essential. That's a high quality respirator intended for whatever type of paint that you spray. As we all know, an airbrush atomizes and sprays paint, and small particles from that paint are going to get into the air. And when I'm spraying some larger areas, there's a lot of overspray that builds up in the air, and I don't want to be breathing that in. So next to me in my studio, I always have a few different types of respirators that I'll reach for and wear, depending on what I'm spraying. Now, I personally cannot tell you which is the correct respirator for you, just because there's so many different types of paints. I'm not a paint manufacturer, and certainly not a chemist. But what I do recommend doing is to reach out to the manufacturer of the paint that you use and ask them what type of mask, respirator, or filtration system that they recommend using with their products. Paints are made up of all different types of pigments, binders, solvents, and reducers. And the manufacturers of them know everything that's in their paint, so it's important to get the correct answers directly from the paint manufacturer. Depending on what type of paint that I'm spraying, I like to use respirators made by 3M. I have a bunch of different ones, and they make some really great products. Now, I personally paint for many hours every single day, so studio safety is something that's very important to me. And when I'm spraying in larger areas, a lot of overspray gets into the air, and I don't want to be breathing that in. So for me, respirators or some type of ventilation system are essential and shouldn't be overlooked. And again, I recommend reaching out to the paint manufacturer to find out exactly what you should be using with their products. Your health is very important, so just make sure you look after yourself. When you paint with an airbrush, you of course are going to need an air hose to connect your airbrush to your compressor. You could use any type of air hose that you'd like. I'm not personally very picky with these. I do like the braided ones, so I use a 10-foot braided air hose by Iwata. This one has a 1/4-inch fitting, which connects directly to my compressor, and on the other side you have a 1/8-inch fitting, and these are used for pretty much any airbrush besides a few of the American brands like Badger and Pache. And to connect it to your airbrush, it's very simple. All you do is screw it on. There's a small O-ring at the bottom of it, so it's going to give you a good seal. But my favorite way to connect any of my airbrushes to the air hose leads me to my second favorite airbrush accessory. That's the Quick Fit Quick Disconnect Set by Iwata. This part connects to that 1/8-inch fitting at the end of the air hose, and this is going to sit in between the air hose and the airbrush itself. And the other part, this one here on the left side, connects to the bottom of your airbrush. And you could see here how easily these two parts connect, and it's just really nice to be able to connect your airbrush to the hose in a second. I own a lot of airbrushes, so I purchased a bunch of these. This is the male end, just so I can connect all of my airbrushes to that Iwata quick adapter. And you can see how simple it is. This just screws on to the bottom of the airbrush. Just a quick note, you don't want to over tighten it. There's a small O-ring at the bottom of this, and if you over tighten it, you could easily damage that seal. So hand tight is all you need. And then with the other end, this is the main part. This connects right to your air hose on that 1/8-inch fitting. And then this is what it looks like connected to the air hose, just an extra little part. Now connecting your airbrush could not be easier. You just press it down into place, and you'll feel like a small click knowing that it's locked in securely. And when you want to remove it, you just grab this piece right here that has some knurling on it and pull down, and the airbrush will pop right up. And my favorite thing about these adapters are that they're universal. They'll connect to any airbrush. It doesn't matter what thread size your airbrush has, as long as you buy the male end of a quick disconnect system that fits your airbrush, you'll be good. So for example, here's the new Harder & Steenbeck Ultra 2024. It comes with its own adapter in the box when you buy it, and it works absolutely perfectly with this Iwata setup. Badger, which uses their own proprietary thread size, it's very small. As long as you buy this adapter, this also fits into the Iwata system. I find that it makes working with an airbrush just a little bit more efficient, so it's definitely something I recommend picking up. But before I connect this to my airbrush hose, there's one other accessory that I absolutely love adding to my airbrush setup, and that's going to be accessory number 3. That's the Pistol Grip Moisture Trap. These are often called moisture filters, and the purpose of them is to act like a last line of defense so that no sort of water or moisture makes its way into your airbrush. Moisture filters and traps are a very important part of an airbrush setup, especially if you live in a humid climate. And I made an entire video on these a few months ago, just talking about how they work and why they're so important. I'll add a link to that within this video. It should appear on the upper right hand side of the screen right now, and I'll also add a link to it in the video description. But besides filtering out any sort of moisture, these also add some support to the air hose itself. Now, what I personally love to do with this is add it to the end of my air hose before the quick disconnect system. And this is what it looks like with my grip. It's a bit lower because of the quick disconnect, and I just personally love the way this feels. You can see at the bottom here, this just kind of rests right into the palm of my hand. I find this to be so comfortable. It just kind of locks the airbrush in place as I'm painting. Another reason that I like to add it onto the hose like this before the quick disconnect is just because I don't have to buy a bunch of these for each airbrush. I just have it on my hose, every airbrush connects to it, and I have that last line of defense to catch any extra moisture. And if you start to notice any water or moisture building up within this, when it's connected to the air hose, you could just press on this spring-loaded air release valve. Again, you want to make sure that this is connected to your air hose and the compressor is on, so you have pressure running through it. When you press on this, you'll feel some air blow out, and it'll just get rid of any of that excess moisture. There's two of these moisture filters that I've used over the years. I like them both equally. The one on the right is the new one, the Iwata one. It's a bit more expensive, and the one on the left is made by Master. I found that both of them work great, so I'd recommend either one. Before I connect these to my air hose, I like to use a small amount of Teflon tape, some PTFE, just to seal those threads. You don't need much of this at all. Small amount's going to go a long way. 1.5 to 2 wraps around is all you'll need. And once it's on, this is what it looks like at the bottom of the pistol grip moisture filter. It's a small amount, just 1.5 wraps, and then I could just screw this right onto the air hose. And I just want to point out that the fitting at the end of the air hose does have an O-ring inside it, so you don't really need Teflon tape. I like to add it just to be safe. And I'll do the same thing by adding some Teflon tape to the threads of this quick disconnect adapter. Just a small amount, remember, just 1.5 wraps is really all you need. When you're looking straight at the threads, you want to make sure that you put the Teflon tape on clockwise like this. The reason that it's important to put Teflon tape on clockwise is because when you screw these threads into the fitting, it's not going to bunch up. It's going to work properly. I'll clean up the edges with an X-Acto blade, and then I'll just screw this right into that moisture filter. Just like everything with airbrushes or air hoses, you don't want to over tighten anything, but this part definitely needs to be snugged down a bit, so I'm going to use 2 wrenches, an 11 and a 12 millimeter. The 12 goes on the pistol grip and the 11 goes on the quick disconnect. And then I'll just use these to just apply a very small amount of pressure, a little bit more than hand tight, to snug these in place. And that's it for the end of my air hose. This is my setup, and I absolutely love using this. 2 accessories I definitely recommend picking up. And for every single painting that I've done so far on this channel, I've been using this setup, the quick adapter, and that pistol grip moisture trap with the Iwata air hose. It doesn't matter which airbrush I'm using, they all fit into this just the same. The next airbrush accessory is one of my personal favorites. That's a pair of Soft Jaw Pliers. I have a bunch of these. I've been using them for years, and I always have a pair of these next to me when I'm painting with an airbrush. The jaws on these pliers are made out of nylon. They're also replaceable. You can unscrew them and swap them out for new ones. And the really nice thing about this material is that it's soft, so you're never going to damage your airbrush when you're working on it. As I said earlier, everything on an airbrush should always be hand tight, but sometimes parts get a little bit stuck and they're just too hard to unscrew or remove by hand. So what most of us are going to do is just reach for a pair of pliers to get some grip to unscrew the parts. And while normal pliers like these can definitely get the job done, they're going to absolutely destroy and scratch up that chrome. When you're using soft jaw pliers like this, you just get some confidence knowing that you're not going to damage your expensive airbrush like an Iwata or a Harder & Steenbeck. I have a lot of hand tools in my studio and shop, and I never heard of this brand IPS. I just saw these on Amazon years ago, so I decided to pick them up. And honestly, there's not that much I could say about them. They're slip joint pliers with soft jaws, and I just love them. I know that Iwata sells an airbrush toolkit, which also comes with a pair of soft jaw pliers. And I'm sure it's a great kit, but I never purchased it because to me, it just seems a little bit expensive. These soft jaw pliers go for like $12 to $15 US on Amazon. I bet you could even find them cheaper. And there's a bunch of other brands that make them too at even lower prices. So whatever you can find, get a pair of soft jaw pliers, pick them up, you're going to love them. And the last airbrush accessory on my top 5 is this universal airbrush holder, also by Iwata. There's a lot of Iwata products in this video, so I definitely apologize for that, but I don't know, they make good stuff. I like this airbrush holder so much that I made an entire video on it, which I'm linking up above right now and also down below in the video description. And what I love about it is that it's just so simple and it holds pretty much any airbrush ever made. And just like everything else in this video, I did purchase this with my own money. I bought it just about 2 years ago, and I paid just over $20 US for it, which is a really great price for what you're getting. It even holds the trigger style airbrushes like this Iwata HPTH, which also has a MAC valve on it, holds it in very securely. I've used a lot of airbrush holders over the years, and this is without question my favorite one ever made. I own a bunch of airbrushes. This thing holds every single one of them, and most importantly, it holds them in securely. And if you want some more detail about this airbrush holder, make sure you check out my full review of it. This is definitely not an accessory that everyone is going to need or want, but if you're looking for the best airbrush holder on the market, in my opinion, this is it. With this universal airbrush holder, you could also buy a spray out pot, and with the Iwata one, it'll connect directly to the universal airbrush holder to form a spray out system. I didn't purchase that one, I just want a separate spray out pot, and what I recommend doing is just find the cheapest one you can. There's a ton of brands that make these spray out pots. They're very simple. It's just a glass jar at the bottom with a top. On this top, there's a small hole so you can insert your airbrush and spray out any excess paint or cleaner. I own so many of these. I buy them from all different types of brands, and I always have one right next to me when I'm painting. When I'm cleaning out my airbrush, it's just nice to know that I could spray some reducer through it or some airbrush cleaner and not have to worry about that getting into the air. So that's it. That's my favorite 5 airbrush accessories. If you add the hose and the spray out pot, I guess that comes to 7, but good enough. There's a bunch of other awesome airbrush accessories that I love to use, so I'm definitely going to have to make a follow-up video of another 5. And you probably noticed that I did not include a compressor in this video because that's an essential part of an airbrush system. Kind of like an airbrush, a hose, and paint. I don't really consider those accessories. That's just needed in order to spray. But if you are interested in a really, really nice airbrush compressor, check out my video that I made on one that I bought a few months ago. I think I bought it at the end of the summer. It's a Silent-Aire DR150. Amazing compressor, unbelievably quiet. It's expensive, but it's really, really cool to have. So that's it for this week's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you back here next Friday. And thank you so much for the generous support of the current channel members. I'd also like to welcome the newest member this week, Constantine. Thank you so much for joining and welcome. Have a great week, everybody, and best of luck in your paintings.